The water was crystal clear when they went in laughing, but when Sarah returned from her business trip 3 days later, the pool had turned blood red. Her guests were still floating face down, and the automatic pump had been running the entire time, but not pumping water. As she stood alone in her backyard, finger hovering over the drain switch, she realized the truth. Sometimes the people you trust most are the ones planning to destroy you. And sometimes, the only way to survive is to let them drown in their own scheme. Sarah Mitchell's BMW crunched over the gravel driveway as storm clouds gathered overhead, perfectly matching her mood. The 3-day conference in Chicago had been a disaster. Her biggest client had pulled their account, citing concerns about recent developments that made no sense. She'd spent the flight home replaying every conversation, every email, trying to understand what had gone wrong. The house looked wrong from the moment she parked. The outdoor lights were still on despite the late afternoon hour, and the pool area, visible through the gaps in the privacy fence, seemed oddly still. She'd left her house to Marcus, her business partner of 5 years, and told him he could invite a few people over for a small gathering. Trust had always been the foundation of their relationship, both personal and professional. Sarah grabbed her suitcase and walked toward the front door, her heels clicking against the stone pathway. The key turned easily, but the moment she stepped, inside something felt off. The air was too thick, too warm, and there was an underlying smell she couldn't quite place, metallic and sweet, like pennies left in the sun. "Marcus!" she called out, her voice echoing in the foyer. "Anyone here?" Silence. She dropped her suitcase and walked through the living room toward the sliding glass doors that led to the pool area. The curtains were drawn, which was strange. She always left them open to let in natural light. Her hand trembled slightly as she pulled the fabric aside. The scream died in her throat. The pool was red. Not the deep blue she'd left behind, but a thick crimson red that seemed to pulse in the fading daylight. And floating in that red water were 3 bodies, face down, completely still. Sarah's legs gave out, and she fell against the glass door, her palm leaving a smudge as she tried to steady herself. Her mind raced, trying to process what she was seeing. Marcus, Jessica from accounting, and Tom, her neighbor who'd always been so kind, who'd offered to help with her lawn when she traveled. They were all dead, in her pool. In her backyard, she fumbled for her phone, hands shaking so violently she could barely unlock the screen. 911. She needed to call 911. But as her finger hovered over the numbers, she heard it. A sound that made her blood freeze. The pool pump was running. She looked more closely at the water, and her stomach lurched. It wasn't just red. It was moving, circulating. The pump system working exactly as it was designed to. But instead of filtering clean water, it was circulating this. Sarah forced herself to think clearly. The pump had been running for days, which meant the bodies had been there since she left. But why? How? Marcus had his own key, his own alarm code. He knew this house almost as well as she did. What had happened here? She stepped outside onto the pool deck, the humid air hitting her like a wall. The smell was stronger here, that metallic. Sweetness mixed with chlorine and something else, something organic and wrong. The automatic pool cleaner was still working, its hose snaking through the red water like a grotesque underwater serpent. "Oh, God," she whispered, covering her mouth with her hand. "Oh, God, oh, God, oh, God." But even through her horror, her analytical mind was working. This wasn't random. This wasn't some accident or break-in gone wrong. The bodies were arranged too purposefully, spread out across the pool as if they'd been positioned. And the pump system had been modified. She could see extra hoses, additional connections she didn't remember being there. She was about to call the police when her phone buzzed with a text message. "Unknown number. Check the pool house. You'll..." Want to see what they were planning before you make any calls you might regret? Sarah's hands went cold. Someone was watching her. Someone knew she was here, knew what she'd found. She looked around the backyard, scanning the trees, the neighbors' windows, anywhere someone could be hiding. But the yard was empty except for the horror floating in her pool. The pool house sat 20 feet away, its door slightly ajar. She'd always kept it locked. It contained the pump controls, pool chemicals, and expensive equipment. Marcus had a key to that too, of course. They'd installed the security system together, planned the whole setup to protect her investment. Her investment. Her life's work. The house she'd bought with the profits from their business. The pool she'd dreamed of since childhood. The sanctuary she'd created to escape from the stress of running her own company. Sarah walked toward the pool house, her feet feeling like lead weights. Each step seemed to take forever, and the sound of the pump grew louder, a mechanical heartbeat that had been pulsing for 3 days straight, circulating death through her pristine pool system. The door creaked as she pushed it open. Inside, the familiar hum of equipment was almost deafening. But it wasn't just the normal pool equipment anymore. Additional pumps had been installed, connected to tanks she didn't recognize, and spread across the workbench were documents, papers she recognized from her office, financial records, client files, and something else, a detailed floor plan of her house, with notes. She picked up the first document with trembling fingers. It was a copy of her business insurance policy, but someone had highlighted specific sections in yellow. The sections about partner benefits in case of death or incapacitation. The sections about who would inherit control of the company. The next document made her legs go weak again. A forged power of attorney, giving Marcus complete control of her assets, signed with what looked like her signature but wasn't quite right. The date was from 2 days ago, while she was in Chicago. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown. Number. They thought you wouldn't come back. The plan was to make it look like you never left the pool area. One more accidental drowning to join your friends. But you're early, Sarah. You're 3 hours early. Sarah's vision blurred as the full scope of the betrayal hit her. Marcus, her business partner, the man she'd trusted with everything, had been planning to kill her, to steal her company, her house, her entire life. And he'd murdered 3 innocent people to create the perfect crime scene. But something had gone wrong. She was supposed to have been here, supposed to have been in the pool with them. The red water, the modified pump system. It was all part of an elaborate murder scene designed to look like a tragic accident at a pool party gone wrong. She looked back at the pool through the open door. The pump was still running, still circulating, still working exactly as it had been programmed to do. But now, she understood what it was really doing. It was destroying the evidence. The red water wasn't just blood. It was a chemical mixture designed to break down organic material, to dissolve anything that might point to murder instead of accident. The extra pumps, the additional tanks, the modified filtration system, it was all part of an elaborate disposal method. Marcus had turned her pool into a death trap, and then he'd planned to throw her into it. Her phone rang, the sound sharp and sudden in the humid air. The caller ID showed Marcus's number. Sarah stared at the screen, her finger hovering over the answer button. He didn't know she was here yet. He probably thought she was still in Chicago, still following the schedule he'd helped her plan. Still predictable, still trusting, still completely unaware that her best friend and business partner had become her would-be murderer. The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. She answered on the 3rd ring, forcing her voice to sound normal. Marcus? Hey, sorry I missed your call. The conference ran late, but I'm finally heading to the airport. Sarah. His voice was bright, cheerful, exactly the same as always. How did the presentation go? Did you close the Henderson deal? Actually, no, they pulled out completely. Said something about concerns, but they wouldn't elaborate. She watched the red water swirl in her pool as she spoke. the pump continuing its relentless circulation. "I'm pretty devastated, to be honest." "Oh, that's terrible. I'm so sorry to hear that. But don't worry. We'll figure out what went wrong when you get back. These things happen in business." "Yeah, I suppose they do." Sarah's voice was steady now, cold and clear. "How was the pool party? Did everyone have a good time?" There was the slightest pause, barely noticeable, but Sarah caught it. "Pool party? Oh, right, yeah, it was great. Just a few people over for a quiet evening. Nothing too crazy." "Good. I worry about liability issues when I'm not there, you know? Insurance only covers so much." "Of course. Don't worry about anything. Here, I've got everything under control." "I bet you do," Sarah thought, watching the automatic pool cleaner continue its macabre work. "Well, my flight's boarding soon. I should be home around 9 tonight." 9? I thought you said your flight got in at 6? Sarah smiled grimly. He'd been tracking her schedule, probably planning to be long gone by the time she discovered the bodies. "Change of plans. Weather delay. You know how it is." "Right. Well, have a safe flight. See you tomorrow morning at the office." "Absolutely. We have a lot to discuss." She hung up and immediately dialed. Sarah stood in the pool house for another 20 minutes, studying the modified equipment with the methodical precision that had made her successful in business. Every connection, every valve, every chemical tank told a story of careful planning and cold calculation. Marcus hadn't just wanted to kill her, he'd wanted to erase her completely. The original pool system had been elegant in its simplicity. Water circulated through filters, chemicals maintained proper pH balance, and everything worked in harmony. But Marcus had turned it into something else entirely. Additional pumps created a closed-loop system that could process organic material. Through a series of chemical baths, each designed to break down different components until nothing recognizable remained. It was brilliant, and it was horrifying. Her phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. Unknown number. "The detective you called? Marcus has been feeding him information about your mental state for months. Paranoia, erratic behavior, financial stress. Who do you think the cops will believe when they find you floating with your friends?" Sarah's blood went cold. Of course, Marcus wouldn't have planned a murder without also planning the investigation. He'd been positioning himself as the concerned business partner, the loyal friend, worried about Sarah's stability. Every conversation, every casual comment about her stress levels, every observation about her working too hard, it had all been preparation. She thought back to recent conversations with Ramirez. Had Marcus been there? Had he been subtly planting seeds of doubt about her judgment, her emotional state, her ability to handle the pressure of running a business? Another text arrived. "Unknown number. Check your office files. Top drawer, left side, behind the Henderson folder. Then decide if you really want to call for help." Sarah stared at the message. Someone was definitely watching her, but they seemed to be helping rather than threatening. The unknown number was giving her information she needed, warning her about traps she couldn't see. But who was it, and why were they helping? She needed to get to her office, but that meant leaving the pool house, leaving the evidence, leaving the bodies. Detective Ramirez would be here soon, and she'd told him to bring a warrant for Marcus's house. But if Marcus had been manipulating the police narrative for months, would they even listen to her? Sarah made a decision. She took photos of everything: the modified equipment, the forged documents, the chemical tanks, the pump configurations. If she couldn't trust the police to investigate properly, she'd have to build her own case. The drive to her office took 12 minutes, but it felt like hours. Every car behind her could be Marcus. Every shadow could be a threat. The unknown number had been silent since the last message, but she could feel eyes on her, watching, calculating. Her office building was empty except for security, which was normal for a Sunday evening. Sarah used her keycard to access the elevator, her reflection in the polished steel doors showing a woman who looked nothing like the confident businesswoman who'd left for Chicago 3 days ago. Her hair was disheveled, her clothes wrinkled, from travel, and her eyes held a hardness that hadn't been there before. The elevator dinged softly as it reached the 7th floor. Sarah's office was at the end of the hall, corner windows overlooking the city, a symbol of everything she'd worked to achieve. But now it felt like a crime scene waiting to be discovered. She unlocked her office door and went straight to her desk. The Henderson folder was exactly where she'd left it, but behind it was something that definitely hadn't been there before. A manila envelope with her name written in Marcus's handwriting. Inside were copies of emails she'd never sent, financial, documents showing transfers she'd never authorized, and receipts for expenses she'd never incurred. But the signatures were perfect, the dates recent, the amounts significant. Someone had been systematically embezzling from their business and making it look like Sarah was responsible. The final document in the envelope was a suicide note, supposedly written by her, confessing to the embezzlement and expressing guilt over what I've done to the people who trusted me. The handwriting analysis would show it was forged, but by then it wouldn't matter. Dead people don't defend themselves against fraud charges. Sarah's hands shook as she read her own supposed last words. I can't live with the guilt anymore. The pool party was supposed to be a celebration, but I couldn't go through with it. By the time anyone reads this, it will be too late for all of us. Marcus tried to stop me, but I was beyond help. Please don't blame him for my choices. It was perfect. Marcus kills her and makes it look like a murder-suicide where she'd snapped, under financial pressure, and killed her friends before drowning herself. He'd inherit the business, claim the insurance money, and be seen as the tragic survivor of his partner's mental breakdown. Sarah's phone rang. Marcus again. This time she didn't answer. Instead, she used her office phone to call Detective Ramirez. Sarah? Where are you? I'm at your house and there's no one here. The pool area is cordoned off, but I need to ask you some questions. I'm at my office. Ramirez, before you ask me anything, I need you to listen very carefully. Marcus Chen has been planning to murder me for months, possibly years. He's killed 3 people in my pool and modified the filtration system to dispose of the evidence. And he's been setting me up to take the blame for embezzlement I didn't commit. Sarah, slow down. You're talking very fast, and some of what you're saying doesn't make sense. When you called earlier, you sounded upset, but now you sound... I sound paranoid, erratic, unstable? Sarah's voice was sharp. Let me guess. Marcus has been expressing concerns about my mental state lately. Probably mentioned that I've been working too hard, showing signs of stress, maybe making poor decisions. The pause on the other end of the line told her everything she needed to know. He's been conditioning you, Ramirez. Months of subtle comments, designed to make you doubt my credibility when this moment came. Check your notes from the last 6 months. How many times did Marcus call you with concerns about me? Sarah, I think you need to come back to the house. We need to talk about what happened here, and you need to see a doctor. The stress of finding those bodies... There's a manila envelope in my office desk behind the Henderson folder. Inside is a forged suicide note and evidence of embezzlement I didn't commit. Marcus planted it there, probably tonight after I called you. He's covering all the bases. How do you know about the envelope if you didn't put it there? Sarah closed her eyes. Even Ramirez, who'd known her for years, was already doubting her story. Marcus had done his work too well. Because I'm being helped by someone who wants to expose him. I don't know who, but they've been texting me information all evening. Sarah, listen to yourself. Anonymous texts, conspiracy theories, claims about elaborate murder plots. This is exactly the kind of behavior Marcus has been worried about. The line went dead. Ramirez had hung up on her. Sarah sat in her office chair staring out at the city lights and realized she was completely alone. The police thought she was mentally unstable, Marcus was probably already spinning the narrative to make her look like a dangerous person who'd snapped under pressure. And somewhere out there, 3 bodies were floating in her pool, while evidence of her supposed crimes sat in her desk drawer. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number, parking garage. Level B2, northwest corner. Come alone. Sarah stared at the message. Meeting an unknown contact in a deserted parking garage was exactly the kind of thing that got people killed in movies. But sitting in her office waiting for the police to arrest her for crimes she didn't commit wasn't exactly a winning strategy either. She took the elevator down to the basement level, her footsteps echoing in the concrete space. The parking garage was dimly lit, shadows stretching between the few remaining cars. She walked toward the northwest corner, every nerve on edge, expecting at any moment to see Marcus step out from behind a pillar. Instead, she saw Jessica. Jessica, Chen, Marcus's younger sister, stepped out from behind a concrete support beam. She was alive, unharmed, and holding a tablet computer. "Hello, Sarah. We need to talk." Sarah's mind reeled. "Jessica, but I saw you in the pool. You were floating. Face down, you were dead." "That wasn't me. That was Melissa Torres from the temp agency. She looked enough like me from a distance to fool you, especially in that red water." Jessica's voice was calm, professional. "Marcus hired her 3 weeks ago to fill in at the office. She thought she was coming to a pool party. You've been the one sending me texts." "Yes, I've been watching Marcus plan this for 8 months. I know about the life insurance policies, the forged documents, the modified pool equipment. I know. He killed 3 innocent people tonight to create the perfect crime scene for your murder." Sarah leaned against a car for support. "Why didn't you go to the police? Why didn't you warn me sooner?" "Because until tonight, I didn't have proof. And because Marcus is my brother." Jessica's voice cracked slightly. "Do you have any idea what it's like to watch someone you love become a monster? To realize that the person you've looked up to your entire life is capable of murder? Then help me stop him." Jessica held up the tablet. "This contains copies of everything. His real financial records, showing how he's been siphoning money from your business for 2 years. His communications with a chemical supplier about Specchia." Sarah drove home through empty streets, her hands gripping the steering wheel as she rehearsed her performance. Everything had to be perfect. One wrong reaction, one suspicious glance, and Marcus would know his plan had been compromised. The earpiece Jessica had given her was nearly invisible, a flesh-colored device that would let them coordinate without Marcus knowing. The house looked exactly as she'd left it an hour ago, but now she understood she was returning to a stage set, designed for her death. The outdoor lights, the positioning of the bodies, even the timing of Marcus's phone calls, every detail had been choreographed for maximum psychological impact. Sarah parked in the driveway and checked her phone. 8:57 p.m. In 3 minutes, she was supposed to discover the horror in her backyard and react exactly as Marcus expected. Panic, hysteria, and a frantic call to the police that would cement his narrative of her mental breakdown. She walked to the front door, inserted her key with hands that trembled just enough to look authentic, and stepped inside. The house felt different now that she knew the truth. Not violated by strangers, but poisoned by betrayal. "Oh my God," she whispered, loud enough for any listening devices to pick up. "What is that smell?" Sarah moved through the house toward the sliding glass doors, her performance building with each step. She pulled back the curtains and let out a scream that was only half-acted. Even knowing what to expect, the sight of 3 bodies floating in red water was still horrifying. "Jessica? Tom? Marcus?" She fumbled for her phone, making sure her voice carried the right note of confusion and terror. Oh God, what happened here?" She dialed 911 with shaking fingers. "1, what's your emergency? There are bodies in my pool. 3 people. They're dead. They're floating in my pool." Sarah's voice cracked with genuine emotion. I don't understand what happened. I was out of town. I just got home and they're all dead. Ma'am, I need you to stay calm. Are you sure they're deceased? They're face down in the water. They're not moving. The water is red. It's all red. Sarah sank into a chair, playing the role of the traumatized homeowner. I think there's been a terrible accident. I'm dispatching officers to your location. Please stay on the line and don't go near the pool area. I already called Detective Ramirez earlier. He's been here. He knows about this. Yes, ma'am, I see. That in the system. He's en route. Sarah hung up and immediately called Marcus, knowing he would be expecting this exact sequence of events. He answered on the first ring. Sarah? You sound upset. What's wrong? Marcus, you need to get over here right now. Something terrible has happened. She let her voice break completely. There are bodies in my pool. Jessica, Tom, someone else I don't recognize. They're all dead. What? That's impossible. I was just there earlier today. Everything was fine. The lie came so smoothly, so convincingly, that Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Marcus had been practicing this conversation, perfecting every inflection. The police are coming. I don't understand what happened. Were they swimming? Did something go wrong with the pool chemicals? I'll be right there. Don't touch anything. Don't go near the water. Sometimes chemical imbalances can create dangerous gases. More lies, designed to keep her away from evidence while positioning himself as the knowledgeable expert. Sarah almost admired the completeness of his deception. I'm scared, Marcus. What if whoever did this is still here? No one did this, Sarah. This was an accident, a terrible accident. I'll explain everything when I get there. He hung up, and Sarah immediately heard Jessica's voice through the earpiece. Perfect performance. He bought it completely. I'm in position. In the pool house. The modifications are almost complete. What kind of modifications? Let's just say that when Marcus demonstrates his expertise with pool chemicals tonight, he's going to get a very different reaction than he's expecting. Sarah walked to the window and watched the red water continue to circulate through the pump system. Jessica, I have to ask, those people in the pool, did they suffer? There was a long pause before Jessica answered. Melissa Torres was unconscious when he put her in the water. The paralytic drug he used works fast. Tom and the third victim, a man named David Kim from the insurance company, were also unconscious. Marcus isn't completely without mercy, even in his cruelty. David Kim? Why would he kill someone from the insurance company? David was investigating irregularities in your policy. Someone had been making unauthorized changes, modifications that would have triggered a full audit. Marcus couldn't let that happen. Sarah closed her eyes. More innocent people dead because of Marcus's greed and paranoia. The scope of his planning was staggering. He'd been eliminating threats and positioning assets for months, maybe years. Car headlights swept across the front window. Detective Ramirez had arrived. Showtime, Jessica whispered through the earpiece. Remember, you're the victim here, confused, frightened, completely dependent on Marcus for answers. Sarah opened the front door before Ramirez could knock. Thank God you're here. I don't understand any of this. Detective Ramirez looked tired and skeptical. Sarah, I need you to walk me through exactly what happened, from the moment you got home until now. They went through the timeline step by step, with Sarah playing the role of the bewildered victim. She showed him the pool, the bodies, the equipment in the pool house that she claimed not to understand. Ramirez took notes, but his body language suggested he was looking for inconsistencies in her story rather than investigating a crime scene. Feet. Pump system has been modified, he observed. Do you know anything about these additional components? Marcus handles all the technical stuff. I just write the checks. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself. Do you think this was some kind of accident? A chemical reaction gone wrong? It's too early to say. We'll need to wait for the coroner and the crime scene team. Another car pulled into the driveway. Marcus had arrived. Sarah watched through the window as her business partner and would-be murderer got out of his car, his face a perfect mask of concern and confusion. He jogged toward the house like a man desperate to help his friend in crisis. "Sarah!" He burst through the front door and immediately pulled her into what looked like a comforting embrace. "Are you all right? I came as soon as I could." Over Marcus's shoulder, Sarah met Detective Ramirez's eyes and saw exactly what Marcus had intended. A concerned business partner comforting a traumatized woman who was clearly falling apart under stress. "I don't understand what happened," Sarah said, letting herself sound small and lost. "They were all in the pool when I got home. The water is red, Marcus. What could cause that?" Marcus guided her to a chair with gentle, protective hands. "Sometimes chemical reactions can create discoloration. If someone added the wrong compounds to the pool system, it could have created a toxic environment." He was already building his narrative, positioning the deaths as accidental chemical poisoning rather than murder. But who would do that? Who would add chemicals to my pool? Marcus exchanged a meaningful look with Detective Ramirez. "Sarah, you've been under a lot of stress lately. The business has been struggling. You've been working 18-hour days. You've seemed overwhelmed." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that sometimes when people are exhausted and emotionally drained, they make mistakes. Maybe you added something to the pool before you left for Chicago and forgot about it." Sarah stared at him with what she hoped looked like dawning horror rather than rage. He was suggesting that she had accidentally poisoned her own guests, that her mental state was so compromised she couldn't remember her own actions. I don't even handle the pool chemicals." "That's your job." "I know you wouldn't do it intentionally," Marcus said gently. "But Detective Ramirez and I have been talking, and we're both concerned about your state of mind lately." "My state of mind?" Detective Ramirez stepped forward. "Sarah, Marcus has expressed concerns about your behavior over the past few months. Erratic decisions, financial stress, signs of paranoia, and anxiety." Through the earpiece, Sarah heard Jessica's voice. "He's moving faster than we expected. Get him to the pool house." Sarah stood up abruptly, swaying slightly as if overcome with emotion. "I need to see the equipment. I need to understand what went wrong." "Sarah, you shouldn't." "I need to see it." Her voice rose to near hysteria. "If I did this, if I somehow caused this, I need to know." She stumbled toward the sliding glass doors, and both men followed her outside. The crime scene team hadn't arrived yet, so the pool area was still unsecured. Sarah walked directly toward the pool house, playing the role of a woman desperate for answers. "All of this equipment," she said, gesturing at the modified pumps and chemical tanks. "I don't remember any of this being here." Marcus moved to stand beside the main control panel, exactly where Jessica needed him to be. "These are standard water treatment systems," he explained to Detective Ramirez. "But if someone added the wrong chemicals, or if the automated systems malfunctioned." He reached for one of the control switches, the same confident gesture he'd made hundreds of times when maintaining Sarah's pool. But this time, Jessica's modifications were waiting for him. The moment Marcus's hand touched the metal switch, his body convulsed as electrical current surged through the modified control panel. He collapsed, his muscles spasming, conscious but unable to move or speak. Detective Ramirez stared at the tablet screen, watching Marcus methodically position unconscious bodies in the pool like a director arranging props for a scene. The timestamp showed the footage was from earlier that evening, just hours before Sarah's supposed arrival home. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, then looked up at Sarah with new understanding. "You knew. When you called me, you already knew what had happened." "Not everything," Sarah said, kneeling beside Marcus's paralyzed form. "I knew someone had been planning to kill me. I didn't know it was my best friend and business partner until I found the forged documents he'd planted in my office." Marcus's eyes tracked her movement, the only part of his body he could still control. The paralytic Jessica had administered through the electrical system was temporary but complete. He could hear every word, understand every revelation, but couldn't speak or move to defend himself. The chemical he used on his victims works for about 6 hours, Jessica explained, moving to stand over her brother. He chose it specifically because it would keep them unconscious during the drowning but wear off before the autopsies, making the deaths look accidental. Ramirez was scrolling through the video files on the tablet. There's hours of footage here, planning sessions, equipment installation, victim selection. He looked up sharply. Victim selection? Marcus has been planning this for 2 years, Jessica said. Ever since Sarah's business started really taking off, he's been systematically identifying people who might interfere with his plan and eliminating them one by one. Sarah felt sick. How many others? 7 deaths over the past 18 months, all made to look like accidents or suicides. David Kim from the insurance company was just the latest. Jessica's voice was clinical, detached, as if she were discussing a business transaction rather than her brother's murder spree. The accountant who noticed discrepancies in the books? Car accident. The lawyer who questioned the partnership agreement modifications? Heart attack from doctored prescription medication? The financial advisor who suggested Sarah get an independent audit? Apparent suicide. My God, Ramirez breathed. We investigated. Most of those deaths, they all looked legitimate. Because Marcus is brilliant, Sarah said, still watching his paralyzed face. He understands systems, mechanical, financial, biological, psychological. He knew exactly how to kill people without leaving evidence, and he knew exactly how to manipulate everyone around him to create the perfect cover story. She stood and walked to the modified control panel, studying the equipment that had been designed to erase her existence. He turned my pool into a disposal system. The additional pumps, the chemical tanks, the modified filtration, it was all designed to break down organic material until nothing recognizable remained. But something went wrong with his timeline, Jessica added. Sarah was supposed to arrive 3 hours later after Marcus had finished positioning the crime scene. She would have found the bodies, panicked, and called the police. Marcus would have arrived as the concerned friend, helped establish the narrative of accidental chemical poisoning, and then guided the investigation towards Sarah's mental breakdown. Ramirez looked at Sarah with something approaching admiration. But you figured it out and turned it around on him. We figured it out, Sarah corrected, nodding toward Jessica. She's the one who's been collecting evidence, documenting everything, building the case against him. Why? Ramirez asked Jessica directly. Why betray your own brother? Jessica was quiet for a long moment, staring down at Marcus's immobilized form. Because somewhere along the way, he stopped being my brother and became something else. Something that killed innocent people for money. She knelt beside Marcus, her face close to his. Do you remember what you told me when we were kids, Marcus? After Dad died and Mom was working 3 jobs to keep us afloat? You said we had to take care of each other. That family was the only thing that mattered. You said we'd never let money turn us into the kind of people who hurt others. Marcus's eyes showed no remorse, only frustration at being caught. When did you change? Jessica whispered. When did you decide that Sarah's success was something you deserved more than she did? When did you decide that killing 7 innocent people was an acceptable price for wealth you hadn't earned? Sarah's phone rang, interrupting the confrontation. The caller ID showed an unknown number, but she recognized it as the same one that had been sending helpful texts all evening. Answer. It, Jessica said. Put it on speaker. Sarah accepted the call and activated the speaker function. Ms. Mitchell, this is Agent Catherine Torres, FBI Financial Crimes Division. We've been investigating irregularities in several life insurance payouts connected to your business partner, Marcus Chen. Detective Ramirez stepped forward. Agent Torres, this is Detective Ramirez, LAPD. We have Marcus Chen in custody for multiple homicides. Excellent. We've been building a case against him for 8 months, but we needed to catch him in the act to make the charges stick. His sister Jessica has been working with us as an informant. Sarah turned to stare at Jessica, who shrugged slightly. I told you I'd been documenting everything for 8 months. I just didn't mention that I was working with federal agents. The woman who died tonight, Melissa Torres, was my daughter, Agent Torres continued, her voice tight with controlled emotion. She was undercover as a temp worker, trying to gather evidence of Marcus's embezzlement activities. When we lost contact with her this evening, we knew he'd made his move. The pieces clicked into place for Sarah. That's why the unknown number was helping me. You needed me alive to testify against Marcus, but you also needed him to incriminate himself completely. We've been monitoring his communications for months, Agent Torres confirmed. We knew he was planning something involving your pool, but we didn't realize the scope until tonight. Jessica's video footage combined with your witness testimony will put him away for life. Marcus's eyes had closed, whether from the effects of the paralytic or from the realization that his elaborate plan had been compromised from multiple angles. But Sarah wasn't done with him yet. She walked back to the pool, where the red water continued to circulate through the death machine Marcus had built. The automatic cleaner was still working, still following its programmed pattern, still performing the task it had been designed for. "There's something poetic about this," she said, loud enough for Marcus to hear from the pool house. "You spent 2 years planning the perfect murder, designing the perfect disposal system, creating the perfect cover story. But you made one critical mistake." She turned back toward the pool house, where Marcus lay helpless on the concrete floor. "You underestimated the people you were trying to destroy. You thought Jessica would never turn against family. You thought I would never see through your manipulation. You thought Detective Ramirez would never question his assumptions about my mental state. You thought Agent Torres would never connect the insurance irregularities to the suspicious deaths." Sarah knelt beside Marcus again, her voice dropping to a whisper that only he could hear. "But most importantly, you forgot that I built this business from nothing. I survived in an industry dominated by men who thought they could control me, manipulate me, use me for their own advancement. Did you really think I wouldn't recognize the same pattern from someone I trusted?" Marcus's eyes opened, meeting hers with a look of pure hatred. "The chemical you used on your victims," Sarah continued. "Jessica told me it wears off in 6 hours. That means you're going to regain the ability to move and speak just in time for your arraignment, just in time to experience what it feels like to be completely helpless while other people decide your fate." She stood and walked back to Detective Ramirez, who was coordinating with Agent Torres and the crime scene team that had finally arrived. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we process the largest crime scene in my 20-year career," Ramirez said grimly. "Federal investigators will handle the financial crimes, we'll handle the homicides, and you'll probably be in witness protection for the next year while we build the case." Sarah looked around her backyard. The pool that had been turned into a death trap, the equipment that had been modified for murder, the bodies of innocent people floating in chemically altered water. Everything she'd worked for, everything she'd built, had been contaminated by Marcus's betrayal. "Can I ask you something, Detective? When Marcus was feeding you concerns about my mental state, did you believe him?" Ramirez had the grace to look ashamed. "Some of it, yes. He was very convincing, very consistent. And honestly, the stress of running a business can drive people to make bad decisions. But you came when I called tonight. I came because even if I had concerns about your judgment, you were still entitled to police protection. And because—" he paused, considering his words. "Because something about his concerns always felt a little too convenient, like he was working a little too hard to convince me you were unstable." Sarah nodded. It was a small vindication, but it mattered. Marcus had been skilled at manipulation, but not perfect. His plan had depended on everyone reacting exactly as he expected, and people were more complicated than his calculations had accounted for. Jessica walked over to join them, no longer the helpful informant, but clearly revealed as the federal agent she'd probably be. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the marble-floored lobby of the federal courthouse, watching through tall windows as news vans lined the street outside. The Marcus Chen trial had captured national attention. A successful businessman who'd murdered 7 people in an elaborate scheme to steal his partner's company made for compelling headlines. Ms. Mitchell? Agent Torres approached, no longer the voice on a phone, but a woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that held the weight of personal loss. The prosecution is ready for your testimony. Sarah nodded, smoothing down her navy suit. Jacket. She'd testified twice before during the preliminary hearings, but today was different. Today, Marcus would finally hear her speak the complete truth about everything he'd destroyed and everything he'd failed to destroy. The courtroom was packed with reporters, federal agents, and family members of Marcus's victims. Sarah took her place at the witness stand and looked directly at the defendant's table where Marcus sat in an orange jumpsuit, flanked by 2 public defenders who'd drawn the impossible task of defending the indefensible. He looked smaller than she remembered, diminished by months in federal custody. Gone was the confident businessman who'd manipulated conversations and constructed elaborate schemes. In his place sat a man who'd discovered that brilliance without conscience led only to isolation and defeat. Ms. Mitchell, the prosecutor began, please tell the court about your relationship with the defendant. Sarah's voice was steady as she recounted 5 years of partnership, friendship, and trust. She spoke about late nights, building their business, shared dreams of success, moments of personal vulnerability when Marcus had seemed like the brother she'd never had. The jury listened intently as she painted a picture of complete betrayal by someone she'd considered family. When did you first suspect that Mr. Chen was planning to harm you? When I found 3 dead bodies floating in my pool and realized someone had turned my home into a crime scene designed to frame me for murder. Sarah's voice carried across the silent courtroom. But looking back, I think part of me suspected something months earlier. Small things, conversations that felt manipulative, business decisions that didn't make sense, the way he was always quick to volunteer information about my stress levels to other people. How did those suspicions make you feel? Sarah considered the question carefully. Guilty. Because you're not supposed to distrust someone you love. You're supposed to give them the benefit of the doubt. Assume positive intent. Believe that their concern for you is genuine. She looked directly at Marcus. It's that trust that makes betrayal so effective. The victim becomes complicit in their own destruction by refusing to believe what their instincts are telling them. The prosecutor walked her through the events of that night 6 months ago. The discovery of the bodies, the realization of the scope of Marcus's plan, the moment when she understood that her best friend had been systematically destroying her life for 2 years. Ms. Mitchell, the defendant's actions cost you your business, your home, and nearly your life. How has this experience affected you? Sarah was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. It taught me the difference between trust and naivety. Trust is a choice you make based on someone's demonstrated character and consistent actions. Naivety is assuming that people's words match their intentions without verifying the evidence. She paused, looking around the courtroom at the faces of the other victims' families. But it also taught me something else. Evil isn't some abstract force that exists outside of normal people. It's a series of choices that ordinary people make when they decide their wants are more important than other people's lives. Marcus wasn't born a killer. He became one by choosing his own financial gain over the value of human life, again and again, until murder seemed like a reasonable business decision. The prosecutor nodded. What would you like to say to the defendant? Sarah turned to face Marcus directly. He was looking at her now, his expression unreadable. I want to thank you, she said, and the courtroom erupted in surprised murmurs. The judge called for order, and Sarah continued. You taught me that I'm stronger than I thought I was. When you tried to destroy my business, I learned I could rebuild from nothing. When you tried to isolate me from my friends, I learned to trust my own judgment about people's character. When you tried to kill me, I learned that I could fight back and win." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "You spent 2 years planning my destruction, and instead you created the circumstances for me to discover exactly who I am when everything is stripped away. I'm someone who doesn't break under pressure. I'm someone who can see through manipulation and deception. I'm someone who can turn a predator's own trap against them." Marcus's hands were clenched on the defendant's table, his knuckles white. "Most importantly, you taught me that forgiveness isn't about letting people escape consequences for their actions. It's about refusing to let their choices control your emotional life. I forgive you not because you deserve it, but because hatred would give you power over me that you haven't earned." Sarah stood up, her testimony complete, and walked past the defendant's table without looking back. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Jessica was waiting. She'd testified earlier in the week, her FBI credentials and 8 months of evidence gathering making her the prosecution's star witness. The jury had watched in fascination as she detailed her brother's methodical planning, the systematic elimination of potential threats, the cold calculation behind each murder. "How did it feel?" Jessica asked as they walked toward the elevator. "Like closing a chapter?" Sarah replied. "Like finally being able to move forward without looking over my shoulder." They rode the elevator down in comfortable silence. Over the past 6 months, Sarah and Jessica had developed an unlikely friendship based on shared trauma and mutual respect. Jessica had lost a brother to his own choices. Sarah had lost a business partner to his greed and paranoia. Both had learned that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones most capable of destruction. "Have you decided what you're going to do next?" Jessica asked as they reached the lobby. Sarah smiled for the first time in months. "I'm starting a new company, security consulting for small businesses, helping entrepreneurs identify and protect against internal threats, using Marcus's techniques against other potential predators. Using everything he taught me about how trust can be weaponized, how financial systems can be manipulated, how good people can be turned against each other through careful psychological manipulation." Sarah's expression hardened. "Marcus won't be the last person to try what he tried. But maybe I can help other people recognize the warning signs before it's too late." They walked outside into the afternoon sunshine, where reporters immediately surrounded them with cameras and microphones. Sarah had given one statement to the press 6 months ago and had refused all interviews since then. But today felt different. "Ms. Mitchell, do you have any comment on the verdict?" The jury had deliberated for less than 2 hours before finding Marcus Chen guilty on all counts. 7 counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy, fraud, embezzlement, and attempted murder. The evidence had been overwhelming. The video footage undeniable, the financial records damning. "Justice was served," Sarah said simply. 7 innocent people are dead because one man decided his financial gain was worth more than their lives. The verdict ensures that he'll never have the opportunity to make that choice again. Do you feel safe now that Marcus Chen will be in prison for life? Sarah considered the question. I feel informed. I understand now how predators operate, how they identify and isolate their victims, how they use trust and intimacy as weapons. That knowledge makes me safer than any prison sentence could. What's your message to other potential victims of financial predators? Trust your instincts. If someone's concern for your well-being consistently results in you doubting your own judgment, question their motives. If someone's help always comes with subtle criticisms of your competence, examine their agenda. If someone's friendship requires you to constantly prove your loyalty while they offer none in return, recognize the imbalance. Sarah looked directly into the nearest camera. Predators rely on good people's reluctance to believe that someone they trust could betray them. They use your own compassion and benefit of the doubt mentality against you. Don't let politeness or wishful thinking override clear evidence of manipulation. Any final words about Marcus Chen? Sarah thought about the question for a long moment, remembering the man she'd thought she knew. Brilliant, ambitious, loyal, protective. All of it had been performance, carefully calibrated to gain access to her life and business. Marcus Chen was exceptionally talented at reading people and giving them exactly what they needed to hear. He understood human psychology well enough to manipulate it for years without detection. Those skills could have made him legitimately successful in any number of fields. She paused, choosing her words carefully. But talent without ethics is just sophisticated destruction. Intelligence without conscience is just elaborate selfishness. Marcus chose to use his gifts to harm people instead of help them, and that choice defines him more than any ability he possessed. Sarah walked away from the courthouse and toward her car, leaving the reporters and cameras.